All right. Hello, everyone. We are live. I am Dr. Nelva Bryant from When Pets Fly. This is the Veterinary Air Travel Podcast, and I am here with a repeat guest, Aaron Avery from Global Vet Link GVL. But before we get started, let me introduce myself again. I'm Dr. Nelva Bryant. I'm a veterinarian, and I work in the airline industry. I am on staff with Delta Airlines and been with them for quite a few years now, and love the role. And what has shown me is that there's a lot of things that pet owners can do, or veterinarians can do, to ensure animal welfare and safety of pets during transport by air. So I've been sharing this information these past few years on my platform, When Pets Fly, through these podcasts, I have Instagram, Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, and also have on YouTube as well. Or did I? Oh yeah, on YouTube. Um, as far as my website, sorry, I'm bouncing around. I apologize. I have a website, and the website is www.winpets.com. Please go there if you have any questions or just need any information. And like I said, I've been doing this for the past few years and love the opportunity to share information to pet owners and veterinarians. But lately, I've been focusing on veterinarians because I do really feel that we need to stand up and do more to ensure animal welfare and safety of pets during air travel. So that's what I've been doing these past few years. I actually just got back from the Animal Transportation Association meeting in Halifax, Canada, and that's where I finally met face-to-face Aaron with GVL. Aaron, please go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Bryant. Good to be back on the podcast. Love coming and chatting with you. My name is Aaron Avery. I'm the CEO of Global Vet Link and Trace First. I'll talk about what that is in a little bit here. I live in Colorado, and I've been with the business for about 3 years now. And our mission is to connect the world of digital animal health and do so in a way that saves vets time, increases the value for all stakeholders involved, and ultimately leads to a better outcome for the animals that are moving. We facilitate movement both domestically and internationally. On the domestic side, we facilitate the completion of health certificates primarily. Health certificates allow animals to move domestically. Think more so on the large animal side, so horses, pigs, cows. A lot of that's in our food chain. But then we also have a business called Trace First, which takes all of that movement data and it provides it to the various regulatory bodies, state governments, and the federal government so that they can ensure that there's disease traceability and that we are living and operating in a disease mitigated and disease-free world for our animals. And so we manage the vet workflow. We also manage the data workflow and the data aggregation and the analysis domestically in the US. And we've proven the ability to kind of create this full cycle data value chain on the international movement of animals, which again, Dr. Brown, I think that's where you spend a lot of your time, just given a lot of the focus on that and the welfare for animals. We focus on the workflow for veterinarians to make sure that the documentation piece, the international health certificate, the associated rabies, titer, and other vaccines and rules and requirements that go along with that documentation are met such that vets can get through that documentation, go back to providing care for animals, and that all of the stakeholders down the chain from documentation to movement, right, to customs and manifest and ground handling and ultimately flying, getting to the destination, being received, clearing customs, quarantining, all of these steps along the way. Our goal is to facilitate that in somewhat of a digital way. So that's what I do with Global Vet Link Trace First. I love it. It's a niche, and there's a lot of attention paid to it because it's a real big opportunity for the improvement in the process and the systems, and also which I guess not also, but which would ultimately lead to a better experience for the animal traveling.
Definitely, it's a better experience for the animal traveling because any mistake that could be made on these documents can impact your pet or any other animal. Well, I'm going to focus on pets primarily, but it's going to impact your pet because they could be held up, they could be quarantined, they could be refused entry and have to turn around and say, if you, I don't know, 8-hour flight to get there, you might have to turn around and come back to the U.S. based upon any error or mistake you make on these documentation. So anything to help veterinarians streamline that process, I mean, that's key.
Yeah, that's right. And I think that's what we're seeing broadly in the industry right now is an appetite to make this process streamlined and more beneficial to all stakeholders. And what I will say is most of the time when an animal is traveling, the vet did their job, right? The vet filled out the document, which was a piece of paper. They did the physical exam. They've determined the animal is fit to fly. And we should probably spend some time talking about
Mhm.
that, just given your background is what does it mean for an animal to be fit to fly? We'll come back. I think we should come back to that.
Yeah.
But if an animal is deemed fit to fly, the vet completes the documentation and the pet moves forward. Oftentimes what we see is the vet did their job, the freight forwarder or the shipper does their job, and then all of a sudden the shipment stalls. And it happens to be oftentimes because of a piece of paper. And that piece of paper is the documentation. It's actually a stack of papers, and it leads to rebooking, or to your point, a pet being quarantined at the facility, the departing facility, for hours and hours without the proper communication
Mhm.
to let the freight forwarder, the shipper, or the owner or the veterinarian know that that pet did not fly. And so that, from my perspective and from what we do at Global Vet Link, that's the broken link is we're still doing stuff on paper. There's no system to bring in the owner, the veterinarian,
Mhm.
the shipper, the freight forwarder, the airline, the customs agent, bring them all into one place such that we can have a single source of truth and we don't have to be stapling a document to a crate. And the beautiful thing is we've built that domestically. So we know how it works. We've done it, and we think there's a real opportunity if the stakeholders in the industry come together and push for that change where we can do this such that pets are flying on time because they have the right documentation and because they've been cleared at every step along the way before they get to the tarmac and are sitting on a hot luggage carrier or in a warehouse.
Yeah, it's going to take, I think, yes, and what you're sharing is part of your presentation that you gave at ATA, which is awesome. But one thing that I think that might make it difficult is that not everybody is at that same technology level. I'm not the most savvy person with all that, but my thought is, though, they're not at the same level. I know a lot of governmental documentation um, is still paper based. A lot of things are paper based, and what are you going to do to change that? Or to me, that would be, if anything, again, if we're all on the same technology level, then it would be perfect. But
Yeah.
what are we going to do about those that have not advanced as well as you guys have?
Yeah, so I think that's the right question to be asking. And the way I see it is if we just walk through at a high level the sort of logistics chain or the value chain of how this works, right? Booking, we can look at it from the human or the animal side, but booking is done digitally. When I'm booking a pet, I'm doing that digitally. Even if it's over email, I'm still doing that digitally. The manifest is digital. The IATA live animal regulations, which is this documentation of sort of the governing body for how airlines fly animals, that's digital. The customs filing, that's digital. That's been done digitally for a couple decades now. And then we get to this health certificate or the documentation that says my animal is who my animal is claiming to be. I have the right vaccines and titers beforehand. I've done any quarantining that's required beforehand. And this animal is approved to fly, right? This animal is fit to fly. The vet has signed off on it. The competent authority, in our case, leaving from the U.S., the USDA has signed off on it. That's all still done on paper. And then ultimately the cargo acceptance outside of animals, cargo acceptance is often digital now too, almost in all cases outside of live animals. And so where I see, to your point, bringing the stakeholders up to speed and allowing them to adopt the digital piece is making a really easy solution that is something where I, as a exporter, as a veterinarian, as a facility, I can just log into this one area where there's a live compliance record and I don't have to adopt a ton of digital skills. I can see that it's there and I can verify it digitally versus, the freight forwarder or the ground handler bringing this to me with a copy of the paper stack and me having to review that manually. That's where I see there being value is the documentation has been verified, it's accurate, it's real, and I don't have to go through and verify that. I can just pull it up, know that it's been stamped, and accept the pet for the next stage in the travel.
Mm-hmm. No, that's interesting. Um, I think that's great, and it would be great if it be implemented that way. But then, I mean, yes, what would be perfect on your system is that it will be reviewed by people that are competent in those areas too, which would be good because unfortunately, a lot of times, depending on where you're going, say in the airline, certain agents may be familiar with documentation, others may not, and may not even know what they're looking at. I know there's a common complaint. Folks will say that they go through getting health certificates for their pets, and then they weren't even looked at or something like that, and they're upset because the agent didn't look at it. But the thing about it is, they may not have looked at it, but if you didn't have it, it will be an issue. So you still have to have the documentation there. They don't know what they're looking for. They just know they need the form. But to say review it and see if it's correct, they're probably not going to do it. They're just looking for the form, and that's it, and move forward. So it's required. But the thing about it is, though, like it's required to see some of these documentation. I mean, like I said, through your system, yes, it will be reviewed by someone who knows what they're looking for. But once you get to your destination, though, think about, depending on where they're going, though, is it going to be, in a sense, a digital system, even that's a destination? What if it's going out of the country to, I don't know, Brazil? What if they require paper documentation, or is the plan to eventually connect out into other countries as well?
Yeah, so you've hit the nail on the head there, right? Mm-hmm. That is one of the key holdups in all of this. Is there is if we think about the hub and spoke model of how I've been talking about this, right? The hub is a single platform with one source of truth, a verified document that maybe the person that's receiving, the ground handler that's receiving the animal, they don't know what to look for, but they know there needs to be a health certificate. Well, they could look in the hub, right, in this platform, and they could see this document is here, and it's actually been verified, right? We've built the logic to automatically verify, so they don't actually need to go in and know what to look for. They know that it's legit, it's not fraudulent, and it's accurate. And then to your point, you have the regulator. So you have a regulator on the origination side. For our argument, it's the USDA, right? In the US and Canada, it's a similar entity, and there's a government entity for each country around the world. And then each of those entities is also the receiving entity for any pets coming into their country. And each regulator, and I'm not saying anything you don't know, but for the people watching this, each regulator actually has different requirements than the next country over for what they want to see in an animal coming into their country to support, the eradication and continued resolve of not having disease. And a lot of these regulators do require some sort of physical documentation. What I can say, and what we've been talking about with some of the major regulators in the world, and one in particular that we're working on building this a very similar platform for right now, is they are open to adopting digital, and they want to adopt digital. And in some cases, only one piece of the puzzle needs to be, a wedding signature, for example. That's part of what we're trying to get over. And so the goal would be, let's build the platform. Let's use it with a country that is digital first and digital forward, which many countries are starting to enter that age, which is really cool. And many of these regulators are. And then the idea would be to expand. And so coming back to the original question, which is, what if right now you build a platform, a regulator requires documentation at the port of entry or at the competent authority, they require this when the animal lands in person. You can still have that printed out. It's just that every other chain or piece of the chain along the way, they can use the digital solution. And I think what you get is sort of over time, the regulator sees that they're the missing piece, and they see how easy and how successful, frankly, it's how successful and how proven it is, and they will adopt. And all you have to get is kind of one or two regulators initially, and then the others will follow suit. And we have some that we think are kind of more on the forefront of adopting digital right now.
That's awesome. And I think it was my question to you after you gave your presentation. If you can go into a little bit further, I was asking and I'm asking because I've seen it happen. Sometimes as far as the health certificates, do not always match that animal. And there's been instances where it's been fraud. Sometimes people have done fraudulent things with a health certificate and switch animals. So how are you going to determine that this health certificate goes with that particular pet?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, this was something we talked about. So on the currently on the health certificate side, a photo documentation or a photograph of the animal is not required to be included in the packet for most countries, all as far as I know, to move the animal. And so how do we know that somebody's not illegally smuggling in or shipping an animal that isn't the same animal on the document? We don't.
Mm-hmm.
And we rely on each link in the chain along the way to confirm the animal is who the animal says or claims to be. But to your point, Dr. Bryant, you have people that are not trained in this, that all they know is there needs to be a document. They're not even
Mm-hmm.
looking at the documents. They're
Mm-hmm.
definitely not looking at the animal that's in the crate. On our side, we also deal with equine, and for an equine Coggins, which is a certificate that says the horse is free of equine infectious anemia based on a blood sample and a lab result. Those require drawings of a horse, or in modern times, pictures of a horse. And so we have millions and millions of horse photos in our database. And what we've been doing with AI is building a facial recognition or an equine recognition system such that we can validate who a horse is relative to the certificate. So it's very similar to when we fly right now, often domestically and internationally, but you just walk up to a camera that takes your picture or scans your face. You don't need a boarding pass. You don't need photo ID. It just says, oh, this is Aaron Avery. He's supposed to be on this flight. We can confirm that this is him because we also have several pictures of him from various other documents he submitted. He can board the flight. Right. And so we've built the same thing on the equine side, and we're seeing pretty early success with it. There's an opportunity to do that on the canine, companion, feline side as well, where we can build some sort of automated AI recognition such that we're not relying on humans to be checking in this process, given the value it would have.
Yeah, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Right now, the microchipping is definitely connecting things too as well. But again, for domestic travel, microchipping is not a requirement. International travel, it is. But having the photo, as you're saying, photo recognition. Can you imagine you bring your pet up to the screen or whatever, and yep, that's the dog right there. So that's good.
Yeah, and I think that's absolutely right. The microchip is a foolproof way to identify an animal. Right. The only thing that lives on that microchip, in some cases, temperature, but primarily is the ISO compliant microchip ID.
Yep.
The challenge is anybody that wants to verify with a microchip has to own a microchip reader. Excuse me for 1 second. I have a bit of a tickle in my throat.
Yeah. Do you think?
That microchip reader costs money and can't really be duplicated. Facial recognition, the vast majority of people that are in the chain will have a smartphone. And all you need is a smartphone with a camera to be able to put it up to the face of an animal and recognize it. So it takes one blocker out of the equation, which is microchip ID reader, which again is a great method, but it just requires initial investment that a lot of folks along the value chain aren't going to be willing to make, or want to make unless it becomes required. And to your point, we haven't seen broad regulation on that. Right.
Other countries, I believe over in Europe, it's kind of like a mandatory thing for pets. For dogs and cats to have a microchip, but here in the U.S., not many people do. I mean, maybe the numbers are growing, especially if they're traveling internationally, but I think the numbers are not as well. It's not a requirement here in the U.S. We do it. I mean, I have my dog microchip too. It's more for recovery, and that's what it's been marketed more for, is recovery of your pet if it gets lost. But as far as travel or even ownership of your, it's not the same. So
That's right.
Yeah. But I love that your idea then. That everyone has a smartphone,
right?
And everyone loves to take pictures of their pets. You know that. So that's the best way to recognize, to link it together.
And I mean, we've done it already, right? We just haven't done it with dogs, but the technology has proven the success rate is high. We're really excited about developing this further.
Yeah, I love it. Anything else? Tell me what else is going on with GVL and the things you guys are doing.
Yeah, so I think that's kind of one of the big things we focused on. We also found that for a lot of pet owners going to get a health certificate, there's a disconnect with, hey, I'll call my vet, I need a health certificate. And the vet says, great, bring your pet in. And then when I bring my pet in, I have to provide all of this information to my veterinarian to get a health certificate. So what we've built is very similar to what happens when you go to your primary care provider as a human and they send you a link beforehand, whether it's email or text. You click the link and it says, here, fill out your health history. Is there anything that's changed? What do we need to know about you? Oh, by the way, if you fill this out before, it'll save you a lot of time in the office. It'll save our doctors time. and it'll make it more efficient. And so we've actually built the same thing on the GVL side. We
Nice.
call it our intake form. And if
Nice.
somebody wants a health certificate, the veterinarian can just press a button. It fires off a link to that person. It's a custom link, so it only works with that individual and their animal, and they can go in and fill out the information ahead of time so there aren't any surprises in clinic, and I don't have to sit there answering a bunch of questions when all I'm trying to do is get a health certificate, a physical exam, and be on my way. So that's something that we're really excited about. And then the other thing is having a better interface for pet parents and animal owners to get their information. And so in the next month, we'll be releasing what we call My VetLink, and it's 2.0. And this is the pet parent interface such that I can just open up my phone, go onto My VetLink. I can pull down any health certificates. I can understand what information is in the GVL system about my pet. And if I need to get another health certificate, that's where I would go to either pull it down or request a health certificate. And I don't have to call my vet. I can just do that from the palm of my hand digitally, and it's immediate. I don't have to wait on the phone, and I have just transparency of information. So we're really excited about that. Again, my job at GVL on the GVL side is to reduce the friction between veterinarians and administrative work and pet parents, and allow vets to go back to practicing medicine and allow pet parents to get the information they need when they need it.
That's good. But I'll just my thought on that. Well, my concern, and maybe you help me clear that concern. My concern on that is that if they can, is it saying that if they've had a health certificate issued through GVL in the past, if they need another one, they can just order one and it's given to them again? Or I'm sorry, I'm confused.
Yeah, no. So they would request it, and their veterinarian would get a notification. So what it does is, instead of me having to call and say I need a health certificate and I need to schedule an appointment, I can just go on to my VetLink, which is my version of GVL, where I can manage my health certificates. Let's say my health certificate is expired. I need another one. I can request one from my veterinarian, and my veterinarian will know that I need a health certificate, and then they can work with me to schedule an appointment and get me in. And they can make sure I have all of the information submitted ahead of time to streamline the process.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah, definitely understand better now. Thank you. Because at one point it made me think that they can automatically get it. It was like, no, I don't think you can do that. But no, that's perfect. And yeah, I mean, it'll save time. So to directly let them know and get their appointment with their veterinarian and get another health certificate done that way. You know, one thing that I noticed about when we went to the ATA, and again, it goes to what I've been really honestly thinking that roles veterinarians should play in this whole transportation process. I love that what you're doing streamlines the process for veterinarians, because again, I've used your system before when I was in practice, and it was really good. But yes, the whole process was really difficult for veterinarians that are practicing clinical medicine to change gears. So having GVL and having that ability to help you find everything you need to complete the health certificate and get it done is a big help. But I still, what I really want to focus on or trying to put out there is that I believe veterinarians should be doing a whole lot more than just signing a certificate, because in a sense, they're taking a lot of the risk for this animal just to sign this document, and they're not doing everything they can to prepare that pet for air travel, basically is what I'm saying. So my thought is that along with the GVL system, with these appointments, there needs to be, in a sense, almost like treat it as a case, not just say an appointment to sign this health certificate. It should be a case where, and as you know, say, depending on the country, they might have to come back for the microchipping. They may have to come back for the rabies titers. All these things might have to occur. So it should be a case. And during that time frame, they can teach and train them how to get their pet prepared for air travel. Because again, this is one part. The document is a strong part. I mean, having this health certificate is a strong part, but it's not the only thing that's going to allow them to get to their destination safely. We mentioned briefly earlier, you can have this document in hand and it's perfect, but if the crate is not compliant, if the crate is too small, if the pet is not show signs of any illness or anything like that, all these things can stop that transport. So I guess, like I said, I'm advocating for veterinarians to be more involved, to make sure they're medically fit to fly in a compliant IATA compliant container. crate acclimation done so they don't freak out being in the crate for the first time. You buy the day before and you put them in the next day and you wonder why they're freaking out or whining and have anxiety. So that's just my thoughts on that. It needs to go hand in hand. Veterinarians need to stand up and do more plus with this system.
Yep, I totally agree. And I think you make a really good point here is who's responsible for this. Ultimately, it's the pet parent, it's the animal owner, right? If the animal has received its physical exam, it's deemed by the vet as fit to fly physically and medically, but it doesn't adapt or acclimate to the crate, that's going to be a challenge, and it's possible the vet may not fly. And so this is where I think there are a ton of resources. You provide really good resources, and it's more than just medically fit to fly. It's kind of this holistic, is the animal fit to fly? And I think there are numerous stakeholders in the industry. When I think about this, there are a lot of we call them, it's more of a colloquial term, but we call them like the shippers, right? Which these are folks that deal with the logistics from soup to nuts of, okay, you want to move with your animal or you want to transport your animal from, say, Atlanta to Germany. Here's what needs to happen in this order. GVL plays one small part of that, which is making sure the documentation is correct, working with veterinarians, because you're right, veterinarians sign on the line. They are the accredited, the national accredited veterinarian who's representing the animal as medically fit to fly. But there's so much more that goes into that. And I think using a resource rather than someone feeling like they have to go about this and learn about it themselves, a resource such as yourself, a resource such as a shipper, which of course charges a fee, can be really valuable to make sure that animal actually can fly when the time comes and they don't have to be rebooked or sit in quarantine.
Definite. I mean, we all have our roles. The thing about that we all have our roles, but the thing about it is, I mean, it's great. The shippers are great, but your average person wants to make this almost into a do-it-yourself kind of project. Right. It seems like, yes, they're going to see their veterinarian, say 10 days before they travel, going by cargo or whatever to get the health certificate. And they think they're doing everything as far as a checklist. I got my crate, check, got my book, my ticket, check, all this. And they think they've done everything for their pet, but they really haven't, in this process. So yes, the shippers has definitely valuable resources. I have resources, but for the regular person who wants to do it themselves, they're not going to get some of those resources. They're not going to get that assistance, the hand-holding that a shipper will give you. So what about them? That's why I'm saying veterinarians, if we can start, standing up and doing a little bit more, maybe it will help. But again, not everybody's going to go to a shipper. Unfortunately, they're not,
That's right. So, that's right. Yeah. And I think you're right. I think there's an opportunity here for us all, to step up and do more. And I think the challenge, right, for at least historically for a veterinarian has been the piece they're already doing was really cumbersome, very complicated. And a lot of vets that we talk to are just like, I don't do international shipments. I don't do international health certificates because I don't want the liability and it's too much of a headache. It takes me too long. It's too complicated, right? That's the approach, or I guess that's the problem that we solve with our product. But then you have this sort of edge around all of that, which is, well, what about the other things that the animal needs that are going to be written, right? The right sized crate, they need to be acclimated. They need to have the appropriate amount of food and water. Like all of that's going to be written. But how do I know as an animal owner that I'm doing that right when I go through DIY? And I think there is, the best person to advise on that is going to likely be a veterinarian who's been around it and seen it numerous times to be able to advise on how the animal needs to be handled and treated in the days leading up to the shipment.
Yeah, I think so too. Yeah. Well, I did come up with some questions I thought would be good for us to dive into. My first question would be, where do you see veterinary teams struggling the most with pet travel documentation?
Yeah, I think broadly where we see this being a pain point is oftentimes the rules keep changing.
Yeah.
And the consequences of whether right or wrong, the consequences of missing a change land squarely on the vet team. Yeah. Right. I think we've seen a big EU change for animals going into the EU recently. I believe, and I may not get this exactly right, but I believe the owner has to be on the same flight as the animal. Yeah. I think that change happened May 1st, and there wasn't really any advance notice given. And and so that comes back to everybody involved. But if somebody's DIYing their animal shipment or their animal transportation, they're going to go back to the only person they knew that helped to fill out the documentation. That's the vet. And so um, this is where I see a real pain point. And most clinics don't have a person that's dedicated to staying on top of rule changes, right? It's usually a technician or a practice manager. They're juggling travel paperwork between appointments, trying to cross-reference the APHIS guidance, country-specific rules, their timing windows. So the struggle isn't a lack of effort. These teams do care so deeply about getting it right and serving their clients and serving their pets. It's just that the volume of this information has outpaced what any individual can track manually. That we have a great solution on that. I mean, it is our system, right? We track that. We keep it up to date. When regulatory rules change, we're up to date. But I think this, again, falls on the vet and their team, that it's almost an expectation they know this. And what we feel is we can support that. And we should make it clear that the vet, from a regulatory perspective, the vet has a specific job. If I'm supposed to be traveling with my animal, but the vet's done all the paperwork right, that's not the vet's fault. But ideally, again, we can be at the forefront of this, informing veterinarians so that they can advise their clients of these rule changes ahead of time, so we're not getting pets that are stranded or separated from their owners.
Well, yeah, definitely. Definitely, you guys are on top of it. To be honest with you, I try to stay on top of it, but it does change so much. It's like, oh my God, it's just too much is going on. I was just reading something earlier today about, I didn't realize there was a recall on a rabies vaccination that Boehringer Ingelheim had out or something. There was a small percentage of, they said small percentage of the vials had sterile water and not maybe the rabies vaccine in it. So either way, there's a recall on it. And this happened, I guess, in February. But I was like, wow, I wasn't even aware of that. But there's potentially, for that lot number, there's potentially dogs or cats that were vaccinated with it. And this country's, they're not accepting them. I was like, I didn't know that. So keeping abreast of that is amazing, because this was an email that came through IPATA, where I read this. So again, someone has to keep in track of all that information, because your average person is definitely not going to know it. Your veterinarian is just doing their job and they're not paying attention. I'm sure the recall was sit out and everyone is aware of it, but that was news to me. I was like, wow, I didn't know that. So yeah, lots of changes. And what people don't realize too is that, the country changes. I mean, Europe might have one regulation. Brazil's going to have another requirements to enter their country. So you have to stay on top of every country that these pets are going to. So there's no standard international health certificate does every country. Each country has their own specific requirements. And if you want to travel there, your pet has to meet those requirements, and that's it. So
that's right.
The great thing about GVL is, again, as you're saying, you guys keep a track of everything that's going on, the country requirements, different countries, and make it easier to get through that whole process.
Yeah. That's our goal, and that's right. We do our best to stay abreast of the news, and particularly on the regulation side, we have a whole team focused on updating our smart engine, which, again, when a vet goes to submit a certificate, the smart engine in real time is looking through every entry they make, and it's flagging with a red flag or a red X anything that doesn't fit that requirement, and it's advising the vet, this is going to get flagged by the regulatory authority because it's not meeting the regulatory requirement. And so that's, again, where we do our part to support making sure that, you're right, animals are moving when they're supposed to be moving.
Definite. So let's see. Another thing, again, that I think that pet owners get confused upon, maybe someone that's going through shippers or something like that, but again, you're do-it-yourself folks with pet travel, they confuse the governmental or regulatory requirements, pet entry requirements going to your destination state or country with what the airline policies might be. And there's confusion there with that, because they'll say, they'll say the airline needs a health certificate. That's why the person someone got upset. They said the person didn't even look at the health certificate. The airline doesn't necessarily need the health certificate. They know that it's required, and they're just looking. The document's there and it's there, but it's not really an airline requirement. It's actually a destination requirement to have that. So what I'm saying is, though, again, folks need to understand the difference between pet entry or animal entry requirements for that destination state or country versus the airline policies with that, So does GVL do anything in reference to share those differences?
Yeah. So our on the GVL side, right, with our international health certificate product, that's where we're servicing and focusing exclusively on the veterinarian and their workflow. But what you're talking about is exactly right in the direction that we're headed and we're building right now, which is that all-in-one platform, right? So it actually brings in the live animal regulations, which is the IATA regulations, which is generally the airlines follow the federal regulations for their origination and primarily destination country. They also have to follow the IATA LAR, the live animal regulations, and that's what we're building and focusing on with some of these key stakeholders is how can we bring that in, and how can we bring the ground handling regulations or the ground handling policies in and service each of these stakeholders, right, in that sort of hub and spoke model in a way where there aren't any more questions and we have all of the requirements piped into one platform. We pull up the documentation and it is already pre-validated that it meets those requirements. How we get there is then if we go back to when that documentation is being created, we know those requirements ahead of time. And so anything that doesn't meet those is flagged at the time of creation, at the time that the vet is filling it out or that the animal owner, the exporter, the shipper is creating the booking or creating the manifest. That's when we would flag that and correct it so that you don't have a pet getting to the airport and there being something missing based on one stakeholder's needs and then allowing that animal or disallowing that animal from flying.
I love that because I can think of as far as airline policies, they vary everything varies by airline as far as their live animal policies or pet policies. There's restricted breeds. Some will have a larger list of restricted breeds, which are the brachycephalic breeds, or even sometimes the dogs that are just inherently strong and have the ability to rip out a crate. Sometimes they won't accept them, such as Cane Corsos and those breeds, they're not allowed. And then the same is brachycephalics, French bulldogs, or what have you, they're not allowed as well. So we'll be able to add that to it, and maybe for that particular airline, and say, I know Delta, we have our temperature limits, temperature restrictions. If it's above 80 degrees Fahrenheit, we don't travel. I mean, just thinking like things like that.
Yeah. That's right. I think the airline is again one of those spokes, and that's a great point, right? Mm-hmm. Instead of getting to the airport and being turned away by Delta because it's 82 degrees, we're not traveling. You wake up in the morning and you'd see that it's 82 degrees, and there would be a notification saying 82 degrees. Delta's policy is that the animal won't travel if it's above 80 degrees, so you're going to need to rebook, saving that trip to the airport. And again, coming back to this whole idea of animal welfare. If that animal is not traveling that day, that's unfortunate, right? But it's also a policy decision, and those policy decisions are in place for the health and safety of those animals. And so if we can prevent that animal from getting to the airport, being dropped off by a freight forwarder or an agent and having to sit in a crate or sit in quarantine, that's the whole goal of this, of bringing it digital and pulling all that information forward so we know exactly where the animal is, what the requirements are, and that we're meeting those requirements. Or if we're not meeting those requirements, we can stop that movement before it's too late.
Love it. That's the way it should be. That's perfect. I love that. Imagine you can have again, it's going to vary by airline, but it's perfect. And again, a lot of folks don't realize the policies that are in place, as you mentioned, for the safety and welfare of that animal. Right. Do you know there was a situation where I saw, I don't know it personally, but I saw on these Facebook groups, this person said that their veterinarian, they were aware of breeds being restricted by a particular airline. So their veterinarian told them to change the breed of that their pet to allow it to go. Yeah, on paper. They changed the breed and everything went fine. And they're publicizing this on Facebook that's what their veterinarian did. Can you imagine the fraud? I mean, you realize that what the veterinarian, he doesn't realize what they did. Number one, ultimately, they put the safety and welfare of that pet at risk by doing that. I mean, number one, that's number one. But for the veterinarian, you're accredited. You're accredited. You basically falsified something to allow something to go. You should lose your veterinary accreditation for that. So, but it's like, wow, the things that people do. But as the veterinarian, it's like, do you realize what the purpose behind these policies?
Exactly.
They're not to, I'm sorry, it may not be convenient for you, but there's a purpose behind it. But and now if something went wrong, who's going to be at fault? Who are they going to blame? They're going to turn around and blame it was the airline's fault for something like that. But ultimately, who suffers?
That's right.
The pet.
Well, and I think so. This is a really interesting thing to talk about, because you're right. The policies are in place to provide overall health, safety, and welfare for these animals. One, when somebody violates that policy, not only are they risking the health and welfare of that animal, but they're almost risking the whole system, right? This animal happened to make it to its destination. Thank goodness. Because if it didn't, exactly what you said would happen. You'd have the airline being blamed. Would the airline be at fault? Partially, right? The airline, to your point, and this is again where a digital system comes into play. The airline didn't check that the breed that was listed on the document was the breed of the animal. Can we expect a cargo handler to be able to check that and know that? I would argue that we can't. But we can expect a system to be able to recognize that. And if we get to facial recognition in dogs, we could pretty easily say that dog is a snub-nosed dog. It is not, whatever they claim to be that could fly, and that would be a red flag. And the airline is liable because they let that through, and even though their policy was not, and so is the veterinarian. And so the veterinarian risks his license. The airline risks a big liability if the animal doesn't make it on time. But the overall reason for this policy is so that these things don't happen, and so that the animal is safely delivered, and and animal welfare is preserved. And so I think that's actually a huge problem. I'm really glad that the animal was delivered.
Yeah.
And if it wasn't, what it would have done is it would have called to action something to address this problem. And I think what you and I are saying is, okay, that's a close call. Something could have gone very wrong. Let's not wait for something to go wrong. Let's not wait for an animal to be harmed.
Yes.
Let's address the problem now.
Right.
Even though heads aren't turned and focused on it because an animal was harmed. We don't need to wait for harm to occur to realize that there is a problem, build a solution such that that problem can't occur, or that the risk doesn't still persist. And that's where I'm really focused.
I love it. That's what I hate being reactive all the. We need to be proactive to everything, really.
Right.
But it seems like, I don't know. It seems like something really bad has to happen for people to change. But why does it have to get to that level? We see a problem, potential problem. Let's not let it grow. Let's get that solution. And what you're saying, that does sound like a great solution for it.
Right.
Definitely.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Wow. No. So pet travel, like I said, people have realized regarding what they're doing. Again, your do-it-yourselfers, completing a checklist. I mean, this is not just paperwork and everything. It's really trying to make sure your pet gets to their destination safely. I view it all as really, it's not a logistical or paper exercise as far as this whole process. It's a medical event. It's an animal welfare event, and it's a regulatory event that we're getting our pets through this whole system. And all that has to go together. You can't regulatory wise just have the documentation in order and think that's going to make it get to their destination safely. That's not going to happen.
That's right.
Everything has to have a play. And again, I keep saying, like I said, we say animal welfare. People don't understand what I mean. Meaning, really, is just making sure they're medically. I would say I'll lap it all together. They're medically fit to fly. All the regulations are in order as far as the document to get into that destination country or state. They are prepared behaviorally as far as being able to be confined in their crate, and they're comfortable with it. And they're in a compliant crate as well. And I don't know if I'm missing anything, but either way, it's a whole big puzzle. Things have to come together for them to get to their destination safely, and focusing on animal welfare.
That's absolutely right. And that, I think, is the challenge, is we're trying to put this puzzle together, and we're doing it in a method that's 40 or 50 years old, which is we're passing a piece of original paper, or photocopied or scanned or printed paper to each party in this puzzle, to each complex sort of chain that's linking this whole thing together, it just doesn't make sense. And I think coming back to a point we talked about earlier, right? You have to get the regulators on board to adopt the technology. And I think they will get there when they see the value. I mean, we've seen it numerous times in various other use cases, right? Human air travel, we talked about that earlier. There's nothing analog about that anymore if you don't want it to be. You can always have the option of printing out your boarding pass. That's not something that's been taken away. And so I don't think we need to go down the road of we're going to digitize the process and then take away paper. That's not the goal. The goal is, hey, let's digitize the process such that every stakeholder involved has less risk of error, less risk of a safety incident. And let's not wait for a safety incident to happen to do that. Let's do it now. And by the way, if you still want to have paper printed out, that's great. You can still pass paper along, but every stakeholder involved will have the ability and will be encouraged to rely on the digital system. And we see this in the airline industry now. When you check a bag, you get a notification. You still get your physical bag tag, right? And you also get a notification on your phone of, hey, your bag has been checked. Click here to watch where it's going and what time it will arrive and if it makes it on your flight. So if you want to resort to your physical bag tag, you can do that. You just don't have to.
Right. Wonderful. Yeah. Technology. Yeah, we do need to advance on that part. Pulling it all together would be amazing because right now it's a documentation. And God forbid, what if the documentation gets separate from, say, the crate for the animal? Okay, well, yeah, question for you. So how are you going to make sure the documentation matches the animals in a shipping crate? How are you going to connect those two together?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a number of ways to do that, right? One of the ways is what we're doing now, which doesn't work, which is taping, stapling, putting the documentation in the crate. An easy way to do this would be a QR code. Either a QR code sticker that you just stick on the crate, that's not coming off. That'll stay on until somebody intentionally takes it off, which nobody in that value chain has the motivation to do because it supports everyone. So that would be, and that's something we've discussed internally, that would be the easiest thing to do. There are a couple of other solutions out there. I know Care Tags is one, which is effectively a QR code that goes with the animal and is either attached to the crate or I think the crate, but could be attached to the animal. And that relays all the information about the animal when that QR code is scanned. But it's simple, right? It's scanning the QR code and that pulls up the documentation. We actually already have this feature on our documents. So if you want to validate that a health certificate is authentic, and I think we have this, I think we have it on our health certificates, but I know we have it on our Coggins certificates. I can scan the QR code and it will pull up that document and tell me that's authentic. That is not a fraudulent document. And so you just use that technology and apply it to the crate, and then you can pull up all of your information. You don't need to worry about stapling or printing, but you still can. If the policy is do both, right? A lot of times we run these things in parallel for the first little bit to make sure that the new system works as well as the old system and that we're not crossing our wires. I think it's totally fine to do both in the short term or in the long term and validate that what we're doing or what we're changing to still gets the information across in the way the old system, or in the way that the old system did.
Yeah, that's awesome. Honestly, it's really wonderful what you're doing with GVL and the advancements you're making there, honestly. And I love just everything that you're saying from watching your presentation the other day and what you're sharing here today. I think it's outstanding, connecting everyone together and everything.
Yeah, so I really think that's the key. And you just have to have the desire, maybe not even the desire, but just the willingness to try it, the willingness to adopt. Ultimately, Dr. Bryant, this actually is beneficial for everyone. It's not, we focused on animal welfare, and I think that's where the nucleus of this lies, right? Is, does this make it better for the animal traveling? If the answer is yes, we should strongly consider doing it. Yes. And then you have your secondary and tertiary effects here, which is, does it make it easier for the other stakeholders involved? The freight forwarder, the customs broker, the shipper, the airline, the ground handler. The answer on all of those fronts is objectively and unanimously yes. It will save them time. It will reduce liability. It will reduce risk. And so from my perspective, there is no reason or incentive not to adopt. It's just that we have to have a meeting of the mind, get these folks together. And that's why at the ATA conference, right, it was so great to see representatives from across the industry. We saw airline representatives, we had ground handler representatives, we had competent authority or regulator representatives, and all of them were saying the same thing. Yes, we need this. Like, please go and build this. And so coming away from that, we've already started having conversations with a lot of these stakeholders, and the energy and the demand for this is palpable. And it's just like, okay, yeah, we feel like we're finally ready to do this, and we also don't have a choice because we're in an age where mistakes, there is just no tolerance for that, and we can see that on social media, right? One mistake is a huge PR liability, and it can hurt the airline, it can hurt the veterinarian. And so there is no tolerance, especially in the case of a live animal, which is often a part of the family, seen as a child, seen as a true companion. There is no appetite for, well, my animal sat in quarantine for 8 hours, or God forbid something worse happened, right? And so that's where I think a lot of this is coming from. But it does save time, and it ultimately, right, when we're talking about businesses, it's going to save them money. It's going to impact their bottom line in a way that they haven't been able to do before.
That's awesome. That's absolutely awesome. Very exciting too. Exciting. I want to see this happen because this is going to change everything, honestly, in reference to that, with pet travel or animal transportation in general. So that's great. Well,
yeah, I think that's right. And I think you hit the nail on the head earlier, and we talked a little bit before we hopped on live, but like, there's so much risk in having a pet movement go wrong, right?
Yes.
Nobody wants to be the headline for that. No. And when you think about other things that travel in cargo, it's like, okay, if my Amazon shipment's delayed by 2 days, doesn't matter, right?
Yeah,
a pair of shoes that got put onto another flight or didn't make the first flight, that's okay. Yeah. And am I going to be upset about that? Yep. And so is everybody else who was on that shipment. But when an animal doesn't make it or something happens, that box gets damaged. If that's an animal, that's a life. And so the airlines, the veterinarians, the ground handlers, they're all coming and saying, we want to make this work. We see value in providing live animal transportation. We have to do it in a way that doesn't risk our reputation and our business. How do we do that better? Yes. Right. And that's where it's not some revelation that we're having now, but I think there's just increased focus on it now because folks are seeing this as a viable means of transportation. It's a viable means of income for a lot of these stakeholders along the way. And so there's a collective need to make this more efficient, safer, and better for all stakeholders, particularly the animals at the end of the line.
And definitely, you know what? And the thing about as far as pet travel, the numbers aren't going to go down. People are, again, because they're family. So wherever they want to travel to, vacations, or, I mean, of course, relocations as well, but they want their pet with them. So what are you going to do? It's not going down. The numbers are going to go up.
That's right. And that's a real, and we talked a little bit about this as well, right? You sort of have a little bit of moral hazard going on right now in the airline industry, which is more. So we're seeing in some months, multiple weeks of record-breaking human travel. And they measure that by number of people going through TSA domestically, right? So record-breaking weeks of humans moving through air travel. Correlated to that is pets that are flying, right? We can look, and historically the percentage is increasing, but there's a percentage of pets relative to humans that will travel. I don't know what that percentage is, but we know that's increasing. So there are more pets per human traveling than there ever have been, and there are more humans traveling than there ever have been. So you're right. Pet travel is naturally going to go up. And right now we're at this point of moral hazard where the airlines are charging $150 to $500 for a pet to come in cabin if that pet is not a CSA. And so then we have people shirking that and going down the moral hazard path of, well, I'm going to get my animal registered as a CSA so I can bring them on in air cabin, allow them to travel with me for free. And that challenges the airline. Again, it creates this inefficiency and this risk of safety and animal welfare because that animal really shouldn't be in the status that it is. Yes. And so then I come back to how can we make the system better so that humans don't feel the need to go falsify, a service animal such that it can travel for free, and rather they're willing to put their animal in cargo because that's where it should be, because they trust the system. And again, it's a combination of trusting the system, animal welfare, and making this easier and reducing risk and liability for all parties involved.
Yes. Yeah, you're right. the fear of going by cargo is what's pushing people to go in cabin and falsify things. But it's sad because only ones that are allowed in cabin is your service dogs, or if they can fit in a soft-sided carrier, and there's restrictions on that too. But it's making people, as you said, falsify that their pet is a service animal because of the fear of cargo. And data I showed during the conference is that the number of animals being transported, or the number of animal incidents of injuries or escapes or deaths that occurred going by cargo is actually very low. Approximately, about 190 cases out of 2.9 million, and this is from 2016 to 2024. So that number is actually very low, but everyone still thinks that's the worst place ever for your pet to be in, is to be in cargo. And that's not true. So if we had a system in place, as you're suggesting, where there's more safeguards and everything and checks and balances through that whole process going by cargo, maybe that will change the mindset going forward in the future.
Yeah, I think that's right. I mean, it comes down to transparency, right? So I have a dog, his name is Ollie. If I want to get Ollie over to Europe, I never would. But if we were moving Ollie to Europe with us, or going on vacation or something, right, I would want to know, how's he doing? Is he okay? And there have been numerous attempts to put cameras in or temperature monitors. All of these things are starting to gain traction because ultimately I, as the animal owner, and that's part of the platform we're building, I, as the animal owner, want to know my pet is safe, my pet is okay, my pet is healthy, right? And if I can see that in real time from the palm of my hand through digital means, I have confidence in what is going on, and I'm willing to go and do that. Mm-hmm. Without that transparency, that doesn't exist, and we don't change that perception of cargo as bad, right? And the other thing about this, and it goes beyond just what we're doing, but it's proper handling and treatment. There was a story from this past week where a cat got out of the crate and ran down a runway, and they had to divert, I think, 3 or 6 planes from a major airport. That is super costly for the airlines, mm-hmm. and for all of the people involved, right? They all of a sudden have to make different plans. We're talking about thousands of people. And it's not because they were worried about the animal, it's because they were worried about the airplanes. And I think rightfully so. But if we have the proper transparency and the proper protocols in place across the whole system, which again, I think to your point, the incidence rate is very, very low. This was a fluke accident, right? And accidents mm-hmm. will always happen. I think we need to be mindful of that and mm-hmm. just, recognize that. But again, as we continue to tighten up the system, tighten up protocol, and agree on standard operating procedure, these accidents will continue to go down, given that they're already very, very low. There's very little risk now, but that transparency piece is going to go way, way further than any operating procedure can, because the operating procedures are pretty tight right now.
Right. Love it. Yeah. Well, I'm excited to see how this goes. I honestly am very excited.
Yeah. We are too. I hope to be back in the next several months, or maybe next year, chatting with you again and talking about what the product looks like and how we're rolling it out.
I love it. All right. Well, I think we're about done for today. Thank you so much for joining. Please don't hang up yet. I want to talk to you a little bit more before we finish, but we're going to end the session now. Anything further you want to say, Aaron?
No. Thanks for having me on, Dr. Brian. I really appreciate it.
I really appreciate it too. And I'm excited to see what's going to happen in the future with GVL. So thank you all for watching. Bye-bye.